Hello dear YouTuber friends, and I hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this very special video, Back to Basics Part 50 with Microsoft Flight Sim 2024 special. It's about getting to grips with Flight Sim in the Cessna 172 here. In this video we're going to be starting this aircraft up from a ramp, cold and dark, talk about taxiing, talking about setting up a simple flight plan straight from the G1000s, covering things like flight level change, basic flight controls as well, so taking off, trimming out, that type of thing, and eventually we'll come towards London City Airport, Huddison International, for a manual landing. So really getting to grips with the controls of the aircraft, the new mechanics, and then actually manually landing it to get used to landing in this new sim. So let's not dilly-dally, let's get on with this video. Okay, so from the main menu, this should be the same for Xbox and PC users. We're going to go to Free Flight. Now, make sure you've got your Cessna 172 selected here. Cessna 172 Skyhawk, default for everybody. What I'm going to do there is configure that livery. I like a certain livery with this. If you go to configure and go to livery, I like this livery personally. It's very snazzy. Cargo 3 adaptive. Save and back. So we've got the Cessna 172 Skyhawk, whichever livery you prefer, but just make sure you've got that selected. Flight conditions for this flight, people. We're going to turn all air traffic off, AI air traffic, and everything else off. We've got a preset of a few clouds, so just click on few clouds and whatever time of day, probably midday this time of year so you can see what you're doing. Save and back. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to scroll over the UK. You can see London here. To the west of London you got Southend. So there's London, there's Southend, EGMC. Going to scroll right into that. And we're going to set off at ramp parking 16. So parking 16. Set as departure. Just going to make sure those flight conditions haven't reset. They haven't. Everything's fine. And let's go fly. I don't need to actually pause this for you because it's pretty quick, isn't it? So we can go straight in. Unlike Flight Sim 2020, you can go and make yourself a cup of tea while that's happening. So there we go. We're in at ramp 16, Southend Airport. And there we go. Now with Flight Sim 2024, you get the pleasure, and it's actually quite a good thing in some ways, of moving around your aircraft and removing covers. On keyboard I'm using the WASD. I better show you this. On Xbox just use your controller. If you've got an Xbox 360 controller, plug it into your PC and use that to move around. If you're doing this via keyboard, maybe make sure on keyboard, bear with me for a second, so I've got keyboard selected in control options, that you've got this selected. I've adapted a couple of keys, so I've just called it test for my settings, but it's essentially that keyboard 2024 transversal selected with a couple of extra keybinds. So make sure that if you're using keyboard, then you can use your WASD keys to move around. Click in your middle mouse button and you can start removing covers. We'll do this quickly. There's just 4 covers, that's 2 of them. There's the chocks to remove or you'll be going nowhere. Oops. And there's this little fella here. So there's 4 different covers to remove. Or 3 different covers and your chocks. And that'll be fine. Now, starting up. First thing you need to do is go down to your fuel selector here. It's basically feeding fuel from either wings or from both. You want to just middle up with your mouse there to make sure that's on both. And this should be the same. If you're starting it cold and dark, that's where it should be. So make sure it's on both. Mixture. Well, actually, before we get there, let me just hide the yoke visibility. An interesting thing here, if you arm the standby battery, mouse up on it, it will turn on your G1000. Give it a second here. We can keep it armed, in fact. But you'll see there, its standby battery is illuminated, so we've not got our masters on yet. But now we've talked about masters, let's turn them on. Alt and battery, and you'll see that's now disappeared. Standby. But we can keep that on, it's not a problem. We're going to put on our beacon lights, just so folks around us can see what we're doing. And that we're starting our aircraft up. There you can see a beacon light at the back there, it's flashing. And what you want to do, mixture, it'll be slightly out. I've got a lever on my Logitech throttle quadrant. I'm going to make sure, yeah, I mean, you're meant to sort of lean it a little bit. I'm just going to put it full rich. This is I'm not going to go through all the different parts of what's the voltages and goodness knows what, so I'm not going to be so anal on this. Push in your mixture so it's rich in, and we can leave it there. And you can turn your magneto key. Now, I've got the XPC yoke. It's a shame not to use that key. I'm going to just turn it to the right. And my aircraft will start up. I'm just going to turn on now the avionics, batteries, and buses rather. And then you should see your other G1000 turn on. And press the enter key down here, by the way. There's a little enter key down here. Let me give you a better view of that. See that enter key? Left click on that, we can turn that on. Right, there we go, we're up and started. Nice and easy. Now, here's something that I'm going to put into this tutorial. I'm going to do a flight plan from scratch. Now, I could use the EFB for... Oh, let me just put that back on there. I've kind of spoiled something there for you, haven't I? Could use the EFB for this. It seems a little bugged from my usage. I think there's a patch or two, so I won't complicate things. We can do it straight from the G1000s, our right G1000s. Probably best binding a key for that view. I'll put link a video where I showed you. Well, I'll link my Flight Sim 2024 playlist. Go and look at my hints and tips there. I show you on one of my settings video. Not sure which one it was now, but I've just set a view for my right G1000. If you don't have that, you can still come down to it. Like so. It's just best getting a key set up for it, a binding setup for it rather, button. What we're going to do, I'm going to set up a flight plan. So I'm going to click on the FPL flight plan button. And you've got 2 knobs here. Let's keep it simple. You've got a larger knob and a smaller knob. I'm going to right click on that smaller knob and you'll get a flashing cursor up here. Using the larger knob, I can mouse up and that will move down and I can input my origin airport, e.g. MC. The way to do this, mouse up on that smaller knob and it'll bring up this new box. Where, now there's 2 ways of doing this. Let's show you the hard way first. You can mouse up and it'll bring up letters. I can mouse up or down on that smaller knob to change these letters here. So I'm going to type in E, use the bigger knob. Let's slow down for the newers. This is meant to be a back to basics video. On the bigger knob here, I'm going to mouse up once. It will go to the next line. Using that smaller knob, I'm just going to mouse up until I get to G. Bigger knob to go to the next line, e.g. MC. Bigger knob to get to the next line. Scroll up again so you get to C. And what will happen when we do get to C it will come up to the side here, south end. Yep, that's the one we want. Gonna press enter. And it'll say, do you want to select a runway? We're going to take off from runway 33 in this direction. In fact, runway 33, we just mouse out, it's just there when we taxi. It's just here for us. Very useful. So, I'm going to mouse up on that smaller knob and use the bigger knob. There's a lot of smaller and bigger knobs, so take your time over this part to get used to it. 2-3 rather, not 3-3. Runway 2-3. Make sure that's highlighted. Enter. And enter again. That's our origin airport's put in. Using the bigger knob to get down to destination. And I'm going to use that smaller knob so we get that box up again. It'll bring up that new box. This time I'll show you the easy way. Have a keyboard connected for this. Click on that icon, that's keyboard entry. And we can just type in EGLC, which is, of course, Huddison International London City Airport. Make sure you click on that keyboard entry icon again. And then press enter. And again it will say runway. Well, let's go. Use the smaller knob to bring up the runways. Bigger knob to scroll down to runway 09. And enter. And enter again. En route. Okay, let's just left click on that to stop that flashing. Hide the flight plan. You see this waypoint here? LCE07. We can enter that into our flight plan. We can enter any of these, but I'm going to enter LCE07. Bring up the flight plan again. Right click on that smaller knob to start the flashing cursor. Where it's got on en route, I'm going to use that bigger knob to go up to en route. So I'm scrolling down to get to this line. Use the smaller knob, mouse up on it. Hope this is not going too fast. Again, keyboard entry for this one. Why not? LCE07. LCE07. And it will actually highlight it in this smaller map where it is, and that's perfect. That's exactly where we want it. It's this one here. Click on that keyboard entry icon again and enter. And it's entered into our flight plan. We can right click on that smaller knob to stop that flashing, hide the flight plan, scroll out, we've got our flight plan route set up straight from the G1000. Isn't that fantastic? Okay, what I'm going to do, people, we've got our beacon lights on, we're going to start taxiing. We need to turn on our taxi lights and nav lights. And we're going to taxi to runway 23. Okay, so there's no pushback truck. What I'm going to do, I'm going to turn on the grass and just go along this taxiway here. Now, get inside the cockpit. With the updates to the Cessna 172, you do have to put quite a bit of throttle in, which is probably more realistic to get this thing moving. I do like this part. Remove your parking brake. I've got a button bound, but I'll do it from here. Left click on your parking brake. Release the parking brake, not remove it. That would be a disaster. And throttle up to a good 40% to get your aircraft moving. There you go. Well, that's about 30%. Keep it there. Once it starts moving, bring it back to maybe, I don't know, 15%. You don't want to be going too fast. You want to be doing a brisk stroll rate when taxiing. So there you go. I'm just gonna cut across this field. Why not? There's not any other aircraft around or people around, and I've got permission from ATC. I'm just gonna get on this. There's a taxi line here, yellow taxi line, and you ideally want to be taxiing along these lines full stop. Ideally, we would have been pushed back there, but there's no pushback truck. I've turned AI traffic off. Why can I hear an aircraft? Maybe I can't. Okay, because we've got... Oh, I'm just going to remove those waypoints. Left click on your left... what do you call that? Control stick on your Xbox. I've just got a button set up for that. Key bind set up for that. There's no aircraft landing there. We're going to go taxiing straight on to runway 23. Okay, let's get in the cockpit for this one. Don't be cheating, Huddison. Let's bring back that throttle a bit. I was speeding a little bit there. Not too much, but a little bit. There we go. We can just line ourselves up with the centre lines on runway 23. So we just go for this one, people. Let's stop there while I explain a few things. Come down to my left G1000. Now, I'm going to set an autopilot altitude for 2,500 feet. I'll do it from the Alt buttons. Bigger button will go up in increments. It will start at 100, but go up in increments of 1,000. And this smaller knob here, we're going up in increments of hundreds. What we're doing, I'm setting an altitude, what I want the autopilot to climb to. The safest way to do this, and I'll link a short I made down below in the description. This figure here donates the best climb rate for the configuration, your fuel and the configuration passengers and whatever you got in your Cessna, for your Cessna to climb at to get to that altitude. And the best way to do this is actually go to flight level change mode. We've not got autopilot turned on, but we can click that. You'll get a readout here called FLC, flight level change, and you'll get a figure here of 0 knots. We can use the nose up button and nose down to affect that figure. I'm going to change that figure to this figure, 74 knots. What it would do, when I turn autopilot on, it won't do anything by itself, so I'm just changing that to 74 knots. When I turn autopilot on, it will keep me in a 74 knot speed profile. When I take off, I'll be doing well over 100 knots when I level out. Or when I take off before I turn autopilot on, I should be over 100 knots. The autopilot will pitch the nose of the aircraft up and maintain that 74 knots as you're climbing, which is our best climb rate. Wrap your head around that one. So when we take off, it won't do anything until we turn autopilot on. Because we got flight level change mode selected and speed for it selected, as soon as we turn autopilot on when we take off, it will maintain that 74 knot profile, as I'll show you in a moment. I'm going to select flaps 10 degrees of flaps. It's the first stage of flaps. I can do it from down here. Just mouse up on that. You can hear that happening. Go outside the aircraft. You can see we got stage 1, 10 degrees of flaps set in. Reset my view. I'm going to hold down my brake button and throttle up. There we go. And then release the brake button and maintain myself with small adjustments with my rudders on that centre line. Just going to push the nose of my aircraft down using my yoke forward a little bit. When we get to about 55 knots, 60 knots, we can take off there. Pull back. And there we go, we're lifted off. Not a problem so far, hey? And I'm just going to bring those flaps up. I've got a keybind for that. So my flaps are up. Just going to make sure now, I'm just holding my yoke back a little bit. I'm just going to trim. Now, trim will trim the nose of your aircraft up or down. Have buttons set. Well, let me just show you this, because that's going to confuse people. Go to settings. If I go to controls, go to my SciTech, which one is it? It's the Honeycomb XPC yoke. So I've got that selected. Flight control services and control trimming services. I've got buttons binded. It's basically a rocker switch here for nose up and nose down trim. You really want to have trim selected. It should be now bind to your controls. And go and look through my Flight Sim 2024 playlist linked down below. In every setup video, I'll set buttons or controls for trim. If you've got a trim wheel, even better. Very important. Let's go back. Because you want to make sure, see I'm dropping there, I've let go of my yoke. I'm going to trim to make sure that I've got positive rate of climb. I can see I'm climbing from looking outside. Best way of doing it, if this cursor here is actually up over this, it means you're climbing. If it's below your speed ribbon here, or your speed readout, it means you're descending, but you can see I'm climbing from outside. Now I can click on autopilot, and flight level change mode will kick in. I can actually go now into heading mode. If I go into heading mode now, the aircraft will turn. That's my heading bug. I can affect that heading bug. Let's come down to this view by mousing over this knob, and you can see I'm moving it now to the left. I've got controls set up for this on my honeycomb yoke. I'm going to center it right to my heading, which is around about there, 219 degrees. Now I can click on heading mode. Heading mode is selected. Wherever I move that heading bug, the aircraft will follow. Hope that makes sense. As we're climbing, people, let me just active pause that. So I hope that didn't go too fast for you. Wherever, I can do it from here. Remember, this is for very new people to flight sim. Wherever I move that knob, the aircraft will follow because it's in heading mode, and we're climbing under flight level change mode. It's maintaining us, well, it's actually 75 knots I've set it to, but that's fine. We're climbing to 2,500 feet. Let me sync my heading bug back to 237. That's your heading mode selector, where you want your aircraft to follow. That's your actual heading, 237. So we can set it back to 237. What I want you to do, people, I'm going to take it off active pause and take it off autopilot. As we're climbing, I'm going to now level out at 2,000 feet. And I'm going to do this so we get proficient with our trim. Come down to that view. There we go, we're almost at 2,000 feet. I'm going to push my yoke forward a little bit, but trim down, because I'm so near to that 2,000 feet now. And I want to make sure that my vertical speed reading, oh, I've gone past it now, is not going up or down. It's actually centered, and it should be blank, as you see there. I'm a bit above 2,000 feet, so I'm just going to trim down a little bit. Actually, that's not too bad. Use fine throttle controls, so bring your throttle back slowly, or bit by bit, so that you're not climbing or descending. Trim down a little bit more. Only trim a little bit at this point. Don't chase it. Let the aircraft settle. There we go. I can see the nose coming down a little bit. I've gone slightly over 2,000 feet. Can you do better? But I'm trimmed out at 2,000 feet. As soon as I turn my autopilot back on, let's make that flight level change 75 knots. Oops. While I'm doing that, I'm just going to trim down again because I'm climbing. Doesn't matter. Trim out there. Just trim out. Ideally at 2,000 feet. Or pick a figure. Pick a value where you want to trim out at. It's a bit more finicky with Flight Sim 2024, I've got to say. But do practice your trim. You can generally get it at just about right. There we go. We're going back to 2,000 feet now. Going to turn autopilot back on. Flight level change is now 78 knots. It will continue to climb now to 2,500 feet. Now, what about our course we set up? If we look at this G1000, we've come away from it. If we go back to this G1000, you can see here, make sure your CDI is on GPS. If it's not, you can change it round. You've got localizer 1, localizer 2, and GPS. You can see it's highlighted there. My course is over here. On this readout, it's telling me your course line is over here. So let's move our heading. It's in heading mode. This away, you can see my aircraft turning. Let's come to that view. Whilst it's turning, I'm going to get it some way towards that course line. I'm going to put it into navigation mode. So click your nav button. GPS will light up in white, because we're not on our course. We're turning towards our course. I've just done that. So I'm turning towards that line, and our aircraft is now going in that position. GPS has gone green because we're close enough to that magenta line where it's able to lock on. We're not under heading mode any longer. We're under GPS mode, and it's following our course. By the way, there's a readout here. So pause that, people. Let's be just active pause. Go back. go over everything we did there. Set an altitude, 2,500 feet. Flight level change mode, ideally for 74 knots, so it climbs at the best rate and the best configuration for your aircraft to that 2,500 feet. Click on autopilot, it will climb up. Move your heading bug to your current location and fly around in heading mode. And then, when we come to this part, then trim out, say 2,000 feet, trim out, practice trim. When you've done that, move your heading knob so that line, now you can see it's come in, but it was over here. If it's either side, move your heading knob to that line so that you get towards your course. Click on nav, and when you get close to it, you should be locked onto your course. Hope that's not gone too fast. You see this reading here, by the way? That's our distance to our next waypoint. That's the waypoint we set up before, LCE07. We're 1.7 nautical miles out. And you see these lines here. I think this is new to 2024, isn't it? If you're running missions, you're used to these boxes. But it means we're flying through those boxes. We're flying on our course perfectly. That's your flight director. Isn't that fantastic? I do like that. Okay, so we're coming towards. I'm going to stay with you because there's a couple more changes. With this lesson, people, we're going to land manually. So no autopilot shenanigans on ILS and goodness knows what. You really want to be learning how to land your aircraft and how to get it configured for a landing. That's what we're going to do. We're getting towards now. We're just about to pass over LCE07. Now we're heading towards London City Airport runway 9. We're 15 nautical miles out. At this point you can see the Thames to our left there. You can put it back into heading mode and follow the Thames because it will lead you. Let's come back to this view. If you follow that the Thames, it will lead you to runway 9 at London City Airport. We're going to keep it in autopilot. We'll keep it simple. But I do want to bring down my altitude. We could keep it there, but you know, London City is pretty much at ground level. Let me just take a quick drink. My throat is drying up. It's at ground level. We don't need to be this high. Going to use this bigger altitude knob again. To change that, I've just moused down on it once to change it to 1,500 feet. This time we're not going to use flight level change mode, that's for climbing. We're going to use vertical speed mode. If I click on that button, a little box will come up here. We can use these same buttons, nose up, nose down, to change that value. I want to nose down because I want to put it into a negative value of 500 feet. So I'm going to click that button 5 times. Let me just clear my throat, I do apologise. I don't usually talk this much. Actually, people, I only talk this much, really, when I'm doing videos. Isn't it funny? Because it's a good way to train the voice. So we're descending now. Vertical speed button, nose down. Change that value to minus 500 feet. Means we're descending. If I want to climb, well, I'll have to change this figure to a higher figure to what we have here. But then I can use vertical speed to climb up by using nose up and inputting a positive value there. Again, if you're new to flight sim, wrap your head around that. This lesson is covering a lot of the basics, not just in flying, but in using the G1000s. And you can take these across to other aircraft that have autopilot capabilities. So there we go. Thought I'll do both in once. Both in one though. We're learning. We're going to manually land as well, so we will be getting back to the good old-fashioned manual controls. We're getting down to our 1,500 feet quite rapidly. Let's decrease that figure to 400 by clicking nose up once. We don't need to descend too quickly. When we get to about, let's say, 6 nautical miles out, there's London City yonder. You can actually see it. Let's come to that view. Next pilot position. The runway is just here. So we're getting close to it. See, you could follow the river around, but then it could make it awkward lining up for the runway. So maybe don't do that. Maybe just do what we're doing here, following GPS. Get to 6 nautical miles out. Should I finish what I started there? I'm going to bring back my throttle to about 50% or so. There we go. We got to our 1,500 feet in good time. 50% or so, so we get down towards flap speed. It's about 87 knots. On this speed ribbon here, you'll see a white line which is telling you where your flaps range is. Will it show it? Let me bring back that speed a little bit now. Throttle a little bit now, rather. Just so I can show you that there's the white line. Don't want to do it yet. We're still 8 nautical miles out. But I will bring it back to 50% to get within that white line range so I can put it into flaps safely. I've got no flaps set at the moment. We're full up. In fact, what am I? 60, 70% throttle. It might get some way towards that now. It doesn't matter. And if you want to, people, you can take it off autopilot now and manually fly it in. I can see where the runway is. But whilst we got autopilot selected, we can take advantage of it. Let that distance come down to, there's the distance to the runway, just to under 6 nautical miles, and then I can affect my speed. In fact, 6.5 will do. Let me bring my throttle down just under 50% throttle deployed. You can see my speed dropping. The autopilot is maintaining our altitude, still under autopilot control. Soon as I get towards 87 knots, which is any time now, I can put it down to flaps 1. Let's do it now. I'm going to mouse up on that. Flaps 1 selected. Your speed will start dropping because you're in flaps stage 1. Get a little bit closer till I can see the pappy lights off the runway. I'll explain what they are in a moment. Let's bring myself back to that view. That's the view I wanted. Oh, I can just about see the pappy lights. Watch your speed. If it starts slowing down below 70, you need to put a bit more throttle in. I've got it just below 50, but I've got it actually on 50% throttle. Just going to wait a little bit longer. What are we? 5 nautical miles out. We're nicely configured now. But you do want to start taking it off autopilot in this configuration because it will just fly you over the runway at 1,500 feet. London City is pretty much at ground level. Just above maybe 20 feet or something. Above ground level. 20, 30 feet, isn't it? The runway. Somebody can give me an exact figure, no doubt somebody would. I can just about see the pappy lights. I'm going to take it off autopilot control. I've got control of the aircraft. And I'm just going to maintain that value now until those pappy lights. Pappy lights. You essentially want, when we get closer, I can show you, 2 whites showing and 2 red. We've got all red at the moment, so it's saying you are too low, Huddison. I want to envision myself landing at the threshold of the runway. When we get closer, you'll see runway numbers. Actually, pretty much on the numbers, over the lights, on the numbers of the runway. So at the beginning of the runway. Pappy lights are coming in now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to decrease my... I'm going to put in another stage of flaps. I've got a button set for that. Now, it's a steep descent, this one, so I want to start descending towards that runway. I'll keep you in that view, it's a good view. I'm beginning to get too high now on that approach. But I can still see it, I can still envision myself landing here. That's what I'm doing. No, I'm too high. Let me just bring that throttle down. So what I'm doing, I'm decreasing my throttle. Which will decrease, well, which will increase my rate of descent. It'll make me descend quicker, in other words. And I need to in this configuration now. So I'm going to bring that back, that throttle, make sure I'm descending. Not too worried. I've left it a little bit late, but it is a very steep glide slope, this. Very steep descent if you're following Pappy lights, and even ILS on this runway. Let's get a better view there, that's better for me. I can see my speed. Just going to make sure, because I'm descending rapidly, that I don't want to go past that flaps range, and I'm nicely in that flaps range. Keep yourself within the 70 range. Pappy lights are coming back in now. Doesn't matter at this point, I can see the runway clearly. I can envision where I want to land. Perfect Pappy lights there, in fact. Now I'm a bit too low. I'm not too worried. I can see where I want to land. I can see my speed here. I've been at a good level of, good rate of descent there, good speed. Got my throttle at the moment about 30%. Because I've been decreasing that to increase my rate of descent. There we go, there's the numbers. When you get over the runway, slowly bring back that throttle to 0. And you want to pitch up. Now I'm doing a long landing here, but I want to do a nice smooth landing, and you can't get much smoother than that, can you? Brake, brake, brake. I do like it when that happens in a video and I don't make a fool of myself. Bring up your flaps, and you want to basically taxi off. What I'll do, people, just to save time. Oh, there's a taxiway coming up. Do things proper, Huddison. So you want to expedite getting off the runway in real life, especially in a little old Cessna, because you'll have a big airliner behind you, like more than likely at London City. I've not seen any Cessnas when I've visited London City. I've only seen airliners take off and land at London City. But you never know, every now and again smaller GA aircraft may get permission too. Actually, no, that's not true. I've seen smaller GA aircraft. Not so much the Cessna, something akin to TBM 850 take off and land, or Learjets maybe would be more accurate. Where shall we park up? I'm going to park up. Oh, yeah, there's a bay there, that will do, I think. Don't know if this is in use or not. But, and then you can turn around and all that palaver. Stick on your parking brakes there. There you go, people. Back to basics with Microsoft Flight Sim for Flight Sim 2024, Special 2024 edition. I do hope that's useful. Practice those procedures and then you can go on to more advanced. We will be covering more advanced procedures in the future. Let me know your thoughts on the video. Give it a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. Many more of these types of videos on their way. And I'll see you soon.